What's up, guys? Jared here. Got another very special guest today. We have the one and only Diego Ruzzarin with us. What's up, Diego?
Oh, good, man. I'm so hyped for this.
Yeah, me too, man. Good to see you.
Good to see
we
you,
made
bro.
a promise in our last video that we would talk about The Matrix together, and here we are. So I already posted my review of the movie, so people know what I think of it, but you did do a very extensive kind of recap and philosophical recap of the first three movies on your channel, but you have yet to reveal what you thought of the movie. So before we get into the thinky stuff, just qualitatively, what did you think of it as a movie?
Well, it's strange, right? I think I shared this feeling with you that it was a very important part of my life. I think Matrix was a huge wake-up call when I was a teenager growing up and going to the movies. And I was like, oh my God, there's some hidden meaning behind the world. I think the main idea, what got me really excited about the Matrix was this notion that there was more to the world than what we see, right? So this was really encouraging to me as a teenager. I grew up with this notion, searching for answers. I think like most of us did in some way or another, related to the idea of the Matrix. And of course, whatever happened in Matrix 2 and Matrix 3 and Animatrix and the Matrix MMO and all the different side stories that we got into, and now we finally get to Matrix 4. A lot of us were like, "What? They're doing a fourth Matrix?" It was a surprise for the fans, for sure, because the trilogy was closed. Like Lana was not even that much interested in doing a follow-up, so it came up as a surprise, right? So you start building hype, and oh my God, it looks cool, and the actors are so nice, and Neo is back, and oh my God, what happened? So we get all the excitement and everything, but we live in the age of hype. And hype rarely delivers on what it promises, like marketing, right? So marketing is
Everything is fucking cyberpunk these days. We just come to expect it.
exactly. So I got into a huge trouble in Mexico because I said that my definition of marketing, it's over promising and under delivering. This is marketing. Marketing is always promising more than you're able to deliver. And I think that hype culture is exactly that. It's enjoying the expectation, but never truly enjoying the delivery itself. And I think Matrix 4 is exactly that. It's a hype bump that got people very excited. The trailers were super viral and everybody was talking about it. I think that even the Unreal Engine 5 promo demo was amazing. It was better than the movie. Yeah. But the movie itself...
Definitely better than the movie.
Yeah, but the movie itself is highly disappointing. Just on a qualitative basis, I will say... Well, quantitative, I'll be even tougher than that. I will say the movie is a solid 3 out of 10 for me.
Ooh, rough. All right. Yeah. I'm not going to repeat any of the things, but I agree. And I think that ultimately what we're going to, at least the way that I'm reading the movie, and even some of the way that I'm reading the movie has changed over the last couple of days. I think that the fact that the movie fails just on an executional level as a movie actually harms its philosophical message. But we'll get into that. The way that I want to structure this conversation is I have pulled 9 quotes from the movie that I'm going to read to you. And then I want to get just kind of your thought. What do you think is being said on a subtextual level? If you think it's interesting to relate it back to just the text in terms of how it, connects to the first 3 movies. And then we'll kind of discuss what, ultimately is being said from a more philosophical standpoint.
Perfect. Love it.
All right. So first quote. This one's going to be very familiar because it's one everyone's talking about. This is Smith saying, "Look, I'm sure you can understand why our beloved parent company, Warner Brothers, has decided to make a sequel to the trilogy." And then Neo says, "What? They inform me?" Neo says, "What?" And then Smith says, "They inform me they're going to do it with or without us." And then Neo says, "I thought they couldn't do that." And then he says, "Oh, they can. And they made it clear that they'll kill our contract if we don't cooperate. I know you said the story was over for you, but that's the thing about stories. They never really end, do they? We're still telling the same stories we've always told, just with different names, different faces. And I have to say, I'm kind of excited." So what was going through your mind when you heard that quote?
So many things. So first, like, they invoke the spirit of Baudrillard directly in that quote. No? Like Baudrillard famously criticized The Matrix by saying that The Matrix will be the type of movie that The Matrix will do about The Matrix, right? So this is an absolutely meta commentary saying that the true Matrix is the entertainment industry. Right, so the true simulation of reality is the entertainment industry itself. So yes, the Matrix is producing another Matrix about the Matrix. So this is very much meta commentary about what's happening inside and the outside. Of course, we know that this connects back to reality and the fact that Lana was pushed against the wall and she was given the hardest choice: either you continue to work on your love child on this very personal story about yourself, or we're going to do it without you with somebody else and could totally ruin your legacy in a way, right? So we know this is very much true. And the other part of the quote where he says that we're trapped in the same stories and story never ends and it's just like the same stories with different faces. This is a direct reference to the book The Hero with a Thousand Faces, no? And this notion that we're trapped on this notion of the hero's journey. So the hero's journey is the most popular trope used in cinema, and but it's very much a status quo representation of our current paradigm, because individualism produces the hero with a thousand faces. So until we are trapped in this notion that we have to pull ourselves by our bootstraps, that individualism is the answer, meritocracy, humanism as a philosophical paradigm, we're going to be trapped in this notion of the repeating stories of heroism in the hero journey. So is the man against the adversity, the man against the society, the man against the obstacle, Sisyphus, like Oedipus, and this repeating trope. So yes, of course, I think we all feel trapped in this trope. We all feel trapped in this notion of the hero of a thousand faces. What is interesting for me is that Smith, in a way, rejoices in the repetition. And even if we know how it ends, even if the ending is always so predictable, and movies have become cliche to the extent that we don't even need to see the movies anymore, we already know what's going to happen. It's a telling that we're living in the latest stage of entertainment repetition. This is my reading of the quote.
Okay, so this is why I think we're never going to get through all these quotes, because there's already so much I want to talk about here. All right, so it seems like all right, so what you're saying is very much how I initially interpreted it. And I guess one of the big differentiators I would make, and I think you'll probably agree, is that like the Matrix being the entertainment industry, I think that you can probably just widen that out just to say capitalism in general, because especially since with the second movie, especially the conversations between Counselor Hammond and Neo, and then the Merovingian and Neo, and ultimately the architect in Neo, they really do make this actually quite brilliant from just a philosophical perspective. They connect these ideas of determinism and then ultimately connect that to like a greater criticism of power structures and stuff like that. So my question is, you mentioned that I guess you are suggesting that even by the end of the movie, Lana still feels that she's very constricted, not only in terms of the stories that she's able to tell, because she'll always have to tell kind of this monomythic narrative, but also obviously like the business element of it. I guess the way I kind of read it is that at the beginning, yes, Lana's in the Matrix, but ultimately what makes her decide that she does want to make this movie and that she does think that it's worth making this movie is because she kind of is reinvigorated in the belief in narrative and the belief in storytelling and being able to actually effectively criticize the system and to effectively, I guess, really wake people up. I think that at the beginning of the movie, that first hour, we really see that like, okay, all of my efforts were just co-opted and the exact system that I was trying to expose just became stronger. But no, I'm going to relent and I'm going to continue. And through this love story, I'm going to prove to myself that no, narrative is still powerful. And, that just like what happened to you and I when we were kids, when, we got hungry for answers and hungry for knowledge based on what this movie revealed to us. I think she's saying that she wants that through that, reaffirming the power of narrative to do that. And even if it didn't work the first time, in the sense that like nothing has really changed, in fact things have gotten worse, she still thinks that it's the answer, or that's the best she can do to fight the system.
Oh my God, I'm really going to struggle not to go too deep on this, because you already opened up so many of my key points that I wanted to discuss about the movie. So first, let's take the critique of capitalism part of it. Okay, so of course you're absolutely right. We can even say, and if we are actually more rigorous about the analysis, the truth is there is no distinction between the outside and the inside of Matrix. And I think this was Baudrillard's main critique of the movie itself. He doesn't like black and white because he said that the black and white distinction between outside the Matrix and inside the Matrix is not really simulation and simulacra, it's Plato's cave. And this dilemma, this paradox was already overcome, let's say. We already know there's no perfect world of ideal ideas versus a real world of real suffering and the desert of the real, right? What he said, that our conundrum is that we're really trapped in this impossibility to distinguish fantasy from reality. Our inability to differentiate narratives, meta-narratives, and objective facts is what is so confusing about our current times and our current situation, right? So of course, capitalism tends to melt meta-narratives, and I think also the postmodern condition tends to devalidate or tend to subtract value from this notion of big narratives are going to save us. As long as we can attach to big narratives, we're going to get ourselves saved. But also, we are still, in a way, in the Freudian Victorian subject mindset. What it means is that we have suffering and we have to deal with suffering. And our way of dealing with suffering is to give it meaning. The way we give meaning to suffering is with stories. Once we can relate our suffering to bigger stories, to share stories with other people, then our suffering is easier to handle. It's easier to manage, right? So Lana's suffering was twofold, let's say. One side of Lana's suffering was the transition, herself discovering her true identity. And I think in the end, in the very core, one analysis that we can make about the Matrix as a saga is the intention for Lana to be accepted as a different subjectivity within the Matrix. She never wanted to destroy the Matrix. She just wanted to be accepted within it, right? She was a new subjectivity. Neo was a new type of subjectivity that didn't fit anywhere. There's a bunch of tropes and aesthetic choices about the LGBT community that I think is very much present in Lana's struggle. And at the end, Neo is accepted, is incorporated, is synthesized into the Matrix, and her subjectivity was accepted, right? I think her struggle is still there. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would say that, like, you're right. There's that piece at the end. So it was that, like, but in this movie, I feel like more than ever, the connections to specifically capitalism and that this society, this, it was
money, power.
The analyst's version of the Matrix has to be dismantled because it's too cruel. Mm-hmm. It's too cruel, not only to me as Neo, Lana as Neo, somebody who their baby is being stripped from them, but also to, the rest of people who are basically kept productive by anxiety and desire, or fear and desire,
capitalism,
which of course is exactly capitalism, right? Yeah. So, sorry, I feel like I cut you off. Go on.
No, it's perfectly fine. I think, and the last part which is exactly connected to your notion of capitalism, fear, and desire. And this is I got this from an interview from a prize-winning writer from Spain. And this lady is totally brilliant. She has wrote an amazing literature books, fantasy books. And she was asked this question by a philosopher: what would you write if they didn't pay you to do it? And she almost broke down in tears. And she said, this is the question. She said, I've won so many prizes. And the issue is that every time I pick up a pen and a paper, already my mind has all these, let's say, variables and conditions about what prices judge, what judges like, what's trending, what's hot, what's not, what will make views, what will make top 10 lists, what will sell in libraries, what will help me pay rent. So she said that the main issue with the capitalism ability to trap desire into this circle of fear and desire, which is very much a central critique of the movie, according to me, is the fact that there's no true creativity anymore. We are unable to think outside the conditions predisposed by the Matrix itself, because the Matrix is so part of us, the code itself, it's so ingrained in our vision of reality, in our understanding of reality, that we're no longer able to see outside of it. So there's no creativity. No wonder this quote from Smith is so relevant. We are trapped into this cycle of the same stories repeating itself over and over because they're profitable.
Okay, but do you think that kind of resignation about creativity is something that that is actually a position that Lana, as the creator of the movie, and that the movie ultimately makes? Because I initially believed that, but now I'm kind of changing my mind and thinking that, like, ultimately Lana believes that no, there is still value in, like, the ultimate creative potential of love, and that if I can tell this love story, then I can really, like, capture people's minds and ultimately free them through, this now, what I would consider is actually a much more over the top, or not over the top, but a much egregiously clear criticism of capitalism. A matter of fact, you mentioned earlier that Baudrillard would have ultimately said that the Matrix isn't simply the division between what is real and what is unreal, but rather the actual system that informs our distinction between real and unreal. And for the first time in any Matrix movie, we have a character. It's like there's like a scene in an elevator where Neo is talking to this guy, and he says, where is it? Oh yeah, he says Zion was stuck in the past, stuck in war, stuck in a matrix of its own. Now we have them characters in the movie explicitly suggesting that the Matrix is not just a computer program. The Matrix is
a metaphor.
Is a system, is a metaphor. And whereas in the second two films, that was only really suggested, when the architect is talking about the way that the system works. Ultimately, he's just talking about the computer system, the Matrix, but his criticism, as well as Counselor Hammond's criticism, can be likened to our wider world. And just, I don't know, I think that it's tough. I'm actually curious to hear what you would think. Which do you think just is a more potent and effective form of storytelling and criticism if your goal as an artist is to reach people, to kind of push them along in maybe their cognitive development, or just to ultimately, wake up, so to say?
So here's probably my favorite piece of philosophy within the whole idea of the Matrix. Reality is structured like fantasy. This is the difficulty of understanding the Matrix. There is no objective reality that we can have access to. And we can quote so many philosophers that are close to this notion, right? So Derrida will say there's nothing outside of the text because everything is within context. So there's nothing outside of text. We cannot give meaning to objective reality unless we have a context of symbols that will help us fit what we're perceiving of the world and give it meaning. Meaning, it's intersubjective, is interrelated. So reality itself only has a structure as a fantasy. So there is no outside the Matrix. The Matrix is the system of symbols that creates the context that give us an idea of how reality functions. Our only way to access objective reality is through fantasy. Okay, so in that sense, I'll give you the point of saying that Lana finds this notion that, yes, narratives are still powerful. Yes, they are. We still need narratives because narratives give meaning to life. Without narratives, what we'll have is just a constant inflow of sensitive information with no discrimination, and nothing will make sense. We need the structures of myths. We need the structures of narratives and stories and heroes and journeys in order to make sense of our lives. This is absolutely necessary. But then again, what I think is deeply, profoundly, in a way, implied in the Matrix, and what Baudrillard wanted to say with his stories about simulation and simulacra, is that in the end, every fantasy that we construct to explain reality is still fantasy. There is no, what the fantasy is hiding is that there's no reality. This is the heartbreaking point about Baudrillard's theory. It's not that the Matrix itself is hiding a reality that is scary or cruel or whatever. No. There is nothing behind the mask. Once you take out the masks, there's nothing left. Nothing makes sense to us. We can only make sense of the world through masks, through symbols, through symbolism, through context, through meta-narratives, through stories.
Okay, so the title of this video is How the Matrix Took the Blue Pill. And the way that I initially think of that is that, at the end of the day, as I said in my previous review, Lana Wachowski is not Neo at the end of the movie, remaking society, or even, I guess in the most charitable version of this, we could say that she has, encouraged or inspired or awoken a generation with this movie to remake society, but rather it's more likely that she is just like Thomas Anderson, who's not only had to make a fourth movie that she didn't want to make, but is now probably making a fifth movie or a video or a real video game or something like that. So my question for you would be then, is there a red pill?
Oh my God, I love this question. I was going exactly there. So my comment, and I actually commented this on Elon Musk Twitter a long time ago when he was talking about the Matrix, that nothing is more blue pill than the people that thought they took the red pill.
Right. like Zizek says, like the moment that ideology has you on its firmest, the firmest grip is the second that you think you're outside of it.
Exactly. The moment you think you have access to
Which is
objective
why,
reality is when you have completely lost grip with the fact that the universe is structured as fantasy for us.
which is why this whole thing about, the whole first hour of the movie where Lana is writing herself in as the character of the creator of this and is, so-called like poking or like, really sticking the middle finger to Warner Brothers. That's why that seems so impotent to me,
Oh my
because
God,
it does
yes.
seem like she thinks that, okay, right now I'm revealing the ideology for what it is, and because I'm revealing it, therefore I am dismantling it or at least
Mhm.
harming it. But the truth of the matter is, I mean, I would go as far as to say not only is she, still
Castrated.
very firmly chomping on that blue pill, but she's even making the system stronger in the sense that, like, it's like when Zizek talks about Starbucks, like it's, ultimately this criticism of Warner Brothers gives kind of this like gesture, this empty gesture towards improvement or changing things or like, criticism. But ultimately, like it just allows the system to keep going. And in a
It's
sense, it almost greases the wheels.
Well, it's exactly. I don't know if you heard this story from Kurt Cobain, like from Kurt Cobain's suicide. Is this notion that nothing sells better than a riot against MTV on MTV?
Mm.
Right. This is exactly it.
Yeah.
So nothing sells better than a critique to Warner Brothers than a critique of Warner Brothers in Warner Brothers. But The Simpsons
Yeah.
did it. The Simpsons did it. The Simpsons were criticizing Fox, and Family Guy was criticizing Fox, and like criticizing the medium that promotes you is not even meta anymore. It's just like status quo. And I think this
Yeah.
frustration was born with. It's probably the birth was in the 90s with Kurt Cobain, in this notion that every critique of the system is already born pre-incorporated. This is what is
Mm.
truly frustrating. There is nothing you can do. The system, it's already like people already work within capitalism with such a detached cynicism. And we know it's unfair, we know it's unsustainable, we know it's not ideal, but we have given up on trying to reform it. So we just rejoice ourselves in this impotence of repeating the same stories of our inability to challenge it, and with nothing new to create. And I don't want to jump ahead to conclusions because we're probably going to get quotes much further in the movie. But I want to talk about the distinction of the four versions of the Matrix. The architect, oracle, psychiatrist, and the final one that we're going to get from the love couple. And I
We're
want
not,
to.
yeah, but I kind of want to let's just skip right there because
Okay,
I feel
good.
like we've already talked about a lot of the things. Okay. So, and this is why ultimately I called the movie sad because,
Very Trumpish of you. Sad.
sad. Yeah. Because they're, oh man, I think I lost my train of thought. But like, this movie suffers from, because exactly what you said is like, if there is a resignation that, or if she's trying to elevate herself above this resignation, if Smith is saying like, hey, we're just telling the same stories all over again, fuck it. And if that's like, a part of the matrix that is very limiting, that is an impediment to freeing a mind that can, then go to challenge the system and ultimately become the real rebel, the supposedly
Real revolution.
the
Yeah.
real revolution. Then I mean, it's just really sad because the end of the movie is exactly the ending of the first movie, which is basically literally instead of Neo flying, it's Neo and Trinity flying, and it has that same V for Vendetta problem where it's just like,
What do
well,
we
we
do?
don't know we're not going to, yeah, it's just like there's a revolution, it's going to happen, we're going to remake society, it's going to be better, I promise. I'm not even going to show you how we're going to do it. I don't know exactly what it's going to do. And like, God, I mean, I didn't watch all the seasons of Mr. Robot because I was so pissed off that at the end of
Oh,
season
same.
one, spoilers, people, for Mr.
Same.
Robot, doesn't really matter.
I had the
Yeah. I mean,
same
like
problem.
basically like they dismantle capitalism. And then the beginning of season two, they're just like, oh shit, where do we go from here? And then
Exactly.
they just like backtrack. And
Exactly.
this is why,
Exactly.
like, this is why there will never be a V for Vendetta 2. There will never be,
like
and there will be a Matrix
Yeah.
4, but it's going to be just like the Matrix Reloaded in the sense that, look,
Oh my God.
I never was critical of the fact that they nerfed Neo at the beginning of the Matrix Reloaded, because like I want more Yen Wu Ping fight scenes. So I'm more happy that he's doing highly choreographed fight scenes than I am that he's throwing fireballs. But they're going to do the same, maybe not with the fights, but they're going to do the same thing in the sense that like, oh, well, Neo and Trinity can't really remake society to how they see fit. There needs to be some kind of other conflict to the status quo. And I guess like that's ultimately another question I wanted to ask you, is that because the very format of cinema, and I'm talking about like high budget cinema, action cinema, is very much like, all right, there is a status quo that is then, threatened, and we need to reinstate the status quo. The third movie isn't really like that, but like how is it even possible to really create that, like
something new,
like to make a movie about remaking society, to make a movie about really dismantling the Matrix?
Well, this is a bigger symptom, I think, of our times, right? So we have been trapped in this idea of recurrent nostalgia, which Derrida named perfectly hauntology. Like these dead ontologies of potential futures that are already dead because they're in the past. It's our past version of the future, which it was already born dead. And I think probably one of the few notions of fantasy that proposed something new was Star Trek. Star Trek is very much an anarcho-syndicalist society. There's no centralized government. People are structured in syndicates and conglomerates. Decision-making is horizontal, not vertical. Democracy is not as necessary and is not as present. We live in a post-scarcity society where production it's able to provide means and goods for more than enough of people. So we are traveling space, researching and talking about philosophy in nice ships, right? So I think the last time we had some ideas of potential alternative futures, it was in something like Star Trek, and other medias did it in their ways. But then we got trapped in late capitalism, and late capitalism brought with itself cyberpunk. And cyberpunk was this resignation saying, even within the digital space where we thought there was some freedom left, there's no freedom, because the digital space was already populated by the capitalist logic. So once the capitalist logic infiltrates the code of the matrix, the code of the digital possibilities, there is no potential freedom to be found there anymore. And I think this is the frustration, because if we compare the 4 iterations of the matrix that we have access to, right? Even if there's been many iterations. So the architect's version of the matrix is that it failed. Well, there's actually a 5th one. Let's say the first one before the architect was the utopic world. So they tried to create a perfect matrix with no suffering. It didn't work, because the critique here is a Freudian critique, saying, no, we need suffering. Suffering is a part of humans. Even if we lived in a perfect world, we're going to suffer about something, because suffering is a key part of the human condition, right? So they said, okay, so we have to write suffering within society. And I think this is truly self-aware, in the sense that it's interesting. In the story of philosophy, you can say that what normally happens is that someone will come up with a definition of human nature. And then what we will try to do is we will try to mold society to reflect the best way possible the human nature that we have defined, right? So this is our problem as history of philosophy, because right now we're living in the paradigm where we are trying to design society based on a wrong version of human nature. We are living in the condition where we say that we are human economicus. We got over the past idea of human politicus. We were supposed to be politic beings, and now we're economic beings. Every decision we make is based on maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. Okay, so this is taken as a fact. Nobody questions that. This is ideology, because it's behind our idea of reality. And what we try to do is we try to create a world that best reflects what we think humans are. Okay, so this is the second matrix. This is the one created by the architect. Okay, so this notion of human economicus, the world in 1999, the explosion of Wall Street, neoliberalism, incrementation of productivity, and whatever. Okay, the struggle with Lana is that she is subaltern subjectivity. She's transitioning to become a trans, and she's not accepted in the world of productivity. Trans doesn't add anything to productivity. To be trans doesn't produce anything new in the traditional capitalism sense. Okay, so what Lana is trying to do is she wants to be accepted within the matrix with her new subjectivity. So the third iteration of the matrix is the oracle's version. At the end, the oracle negotiates with the architect, and we have the oracle's version of the matrix, right, with the rainbow sky. Why the rainbow sky? Very symbolic, is the integration of different subjectivities and different identities within what the matrix seems as functionality. And then what we have in the missing gap between Matrix 3 and Matrix 4 is that we think that the war was won, new subjectivities were permitted inside the matrix, people were allowed to leave if they wanted to leave. We have no idea how that happened. How were people presented with the choice? Can you imagine, like, waking up on the next day after the oracle took over and you're like, so man, I'm sorry to break it out to you, this is a simulation, do you want to wake up? And everybody will be like, what the fuck? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? You know, it will be so weird. But we know that it failed at some point. But the critique of the psychiatrist, of Neil Patrick Harris, is that it was not productive enough in terms of energy outcome. So the only interpretation I can give metaphorically to this notion that what the matrix is really harvesting, it's our creative potential. It's our energy to produce. And to produce is implied that it's to produce something new. Otherwise, it's to replicate, right? But even if it's a cycle of replication and whatnot, energy is supposed to be energy in an only directional way. That doesn't have a priori meaning. It's just energy in the sense of potential openness, of full openness and creativity, right? So Neil Patrick Harris makes a critique. It's saying that, okay, all this openness, woke, rainbow bullshit at the end of Matrix 3 is not productive enough. We have to go back to trapping all these new identities and new subjectivity in the old cycle of productivity. We have to instrumentalize the necessity for identity in the cycle of capitalism productivity. And this is Matrix 4, you know, where fear and desire is reintroduced as the core value that is producing newness in the matrix. But of course, what Lana feels is the sense that even her identity that was so new, special, colorful, niche, subaltern was pre-incorporated and reduced, commoditized down to the level of just produce, otherwise you're worthless, right? And I think this is the frustration presented at Neil Patrick Harris' version of the Matrix, which is the one we see in Matrix 4. But then at the end, at Matrix 5, what Neo and Trinity get is that they get the power to do it again. And what I love is that Neil Patrick Harris tells to them, I see what you will do. I want to see what you guys want to do. You know, he ends the movie with a very much open question, like, what's V for Vendetta 2 is going to be like? Like, now you tell me, how are you going to keep this ball running? Because what nobody has ever talked about in the Matrix is actually shutting it down. Nobody wants to shut it down. Everybody wants to keep capitalism going. We're just like resignated reformists. And I fucking hate centrists. That's why I hate centrists. Because it's very easy to see if somebody is on the right of the political spectrum or the left. You just ask them, do you believe there's a political center? If they say yes, they're right. That's it. There's no political center. The only true revolution is a leftist revolution in the sense of seizing the means of production. And I don't want to sound too tanky here, but it's true. Like, unless we talk about who owns the matrix and who controls the matrix, whatever you do with the matrix itself is bullshit. It will end up being incorporated as productivity because the matrix only cares about productivity in the end.
Okay, so I mean, but back to my question about like, do you think that Lana thinks that narrative or that these movies can do that, can bring upon a leftist revolution?
I think she does, but I think she's wrong.
And you think that so I think that, but I mean, I got to say, I struggle with this. I mean, one, I am kind of on the same page as you are in the sense that, like, okay, I think that it's definitely possible that capitalism is more powerful than narrative. And I think that even as I was discussing earlier, some of the logic of capital is already kind of baked into narrative. When I say that, like, the narrative structure is such that it has to be something upsetting the status quo. We need to be kind of reinstating the status quo. I mean, that's something that is baked into our entire logic of what makes, us emotionally resonate. There's another quote. Yeah. And there's a quote that the therapist or the analyst says that, ultimately, like, what makes people go is their emotions. And in a sense, like, if we're saying that narrative or cinema is ultimately kind of this kind of very technologically advanced form of kind of prodding us to feel emotional. I still think that works within the capitalist logic. So in that sense, I don't think that that narrative is more powerful than capitalism. However, look at the two of us. I mean, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you if it wasn't for the Matrix. I probably wouldn't even be the person that I am or anything near it if it wasn't for the Matrix. I wouldn't have studied any kind of philosophy. I wouldn't have had the career trajectory I had. And, you know, I'm not saying that like you and I are like, you know, the true revolutionaries who are like really like, you know, promoting positive change. But if we're not at least first having these conversations, and if these conversations are not propelled by the Matrix, which it clearly is because this video is about the Matrix, then can we not give her some credit for that?
Well, my response to that is that in the end, I'm a materialist, okay? And just like breaking this down to people is that the idealist notion, when we talk about idealist philosophy, and I think capitalism is very much an idealist philosophy, and the Matrix is very much an idealist narrative, is that ideas shape reality. And materialism is, well, at least dialectical materialism is the other way around. Reality shapes ideas. Okay, so material conditions is what brings forward new ideas. And these new ideas then can be used to either assert, replicate, or criticize reality. But in the end, only reality can give birth to new ideas. Only real material conditions can shape new ideas, okay? Or new ideologies or new superstructures, that Marx will call them, right? So like you were saying, because of the Matrix, we're having this conversation. And I will say, well, no. Because of the internet, we're having this conversation. Because of Zoom and microphones and nice cameras, we're having this conversation. The Matrix is the excuse. What allows us to have this conversation is actually material conditions. So my criticism at the end is that we will never see true new creativity and true new identities unless we do changes on the material conditions. And I think what the Matrix is revealing to us is that since all the changes are made on the simulation level, and not on the reality level, we see no real change. We only see slightly different iterations of the same story, right? So unless we actually change how the real Matrix, and when I'm saying the real Matrix, I'm saying these pod capsules with people plugged in and, you know, like the world going to crap and no sunlight and no trees and no birds and no dazing, you know, no in-body experience of the world. Unless those real material conditions change, nothing that happens within the Matrix is really worth anything. Like saying, like, no idealistic criticism of capitalism will ever change capitalism. Only changes in the material conditions will actually make a change in capitalism itself. But yes, those material changes can come from idealistic criticism. That can help. That can happen. That's dialectic. Of course, our conversations can actually, I don't know, inspire somebody. And I'm going to use myself as a real example. I'm working on 2 laws in Mexico, like real laws with the government and stuff like. One of them is to punish coaches and gurus and people selling these miracle cures in the internet, and to legislate that part of the internet, which I think is really nocive and harmful. And the other one is that I want to change how we treat people with different abilities, because normally in Mexico you call them people with disabilities, and I'm trying to change the legal name, to people with different abilities. And this is a work that has been done in many countries before. My son it's a case, but I want to make changes in the material world. You know, like I think that if these conversations will actually trigger somebody to do something in the real world, in the way we relate to each other, in the way we walk on the streets, in the way we produce goods and services, in the way we eat, we live, we travel, unless we bring these ideas to the reality, to the material level, it will never have the necessary impact for the revolution to actually take place. You know, that's my reading.
So okay, would you say it's accurate to boil that down to like a Matrix 4 will never be enough? We need a Matrix 5, and it needs to not be the Matrix 2.
Yeah, something like that. You know what? But not only that, we need somebody to be inspired by the Matrix 5 and say, you know what? Fuck it. I want free internet. Like I want my internet. I'm only going to use VPN from now on, and I'm going to be completely off the grid. And I want to create something like blockchain so people can have a freer access beyond the algorithm, because we haven't talked about the role of the algorithm. I think in the end, the oracle is the metaphor of the algorithm. It's people telling us what we're supposed to be, and we believing that story of what we're supposed to be. So if we want true freedom to be ourselves, we have to move beyond the trapped desire of capitalism and the algorithm anticipating our every need and desire.
So, yeah. So I guess my question then is like, where do you think Lana's awareness is on this? Do you think that at the end of the day, she's saying that no, narrative is still the red pill, and that the second half of the movie we are? Because I think that's what she thinks.
Yeah,
I think that it's just not enough for her. It would be too much for her to swallow the fact that she's like acting out this impotent form of rebellion. She has to believe on some level that she actually is threatening the system. And I think she's smart enough to know that the kind of like shallow criticism of, bringing up the production drama and stuff in the first hour isn't actually going to be making that difference. But I do think that she believes, through kind of maybe the same kind of vague spiritualism that we saw in the third movie, that it is kind of this love story, and it is kind of this I guess, belief in some sort of transcendence through connection or something like that, that ultimately will create that change.
Let me ask you let me respond with a question. What do you think?
Yeah.
What is, according to you, or what do you feel is the main question brought forward by The Matrix?
This newest movie or The Matrix as a whole?
Both, if you think they're different.
Well, I think that there's more specific messages in some of the installments, but I guess like if I were to say the series as a whole, and I think the answer would still be, and I think it's kind of a basic answer, but the answer would still be what is real. And and I don't want that to necessarily mean that I am just focusing on Plato's allegory of the cave and I'm precluding kind of the more postmodern criticism, because even then, I think a lot of the people who are more resistant to structural critiques are basically saying like, well, if you can't show me like a direct cause and effect, then it's not real. So I think that even the discussion that Counselor Hammond has about how power isn't something that you can exactly point to, that there are like these, relationships that are built on like structures of incentive and stuff
very
like that.
Foucaultian.
Exactly. So I still think that, that is under the under what is real. And so I would say that what is real is probably
the main question about
the main question of the Matrix. Yeah.
And what do you think is the main problem that the Matrix is trying to solve?
So the movies that they are trying to solve, again, I think that there's other than the love story, there's a fair amount less spirituality present in this installment than there were in the first three movies, especially the third movie. Honestly, for the fourth movie, I think what the Matrix is ultimately trying to solve is how do I continue to make revolutionary art? Like, I think that's just the big struggle of the fourth movie. In terms of the third movie, I think the third movie, because the whole thing about freedom versus or determinism versus free will and choice, that's pretty absent in the fourth movie. It really does double down on the structural critique. And so I think that whereas I think that was a little bit more of a humanistic, existential, universal exploration in the third movie, in the fourth movie, it really is just like, how do we break this cycle that not only, throughout what the analyst says about how people are caught up in anxiety and fear, or fear and desire, not only does the system oppress everybody, but it oppresses me. And here's my example of it, which again, I don't know, one of the reasons, and I think, since we're kind of getting towards the end of our discussion here, I do want to bring this back to just how does this philosophy that we've discussed, because, from all the things that we've discussed so far, it does seem to be quite a thoughtful film. But at the end of the day, both of us still don't like it. And I'll also say that although, this movie has provoked very thoughtful discussion, I do find it a little bit, first of all, I don't think that she achieved what she wanted to achieve in terms of really recapturing that revolutionary essence,
100%.
Despite the criticisms of the first hour of the movie. But secondly, I honestly find the whole exercise a little bit tasteless, because because Lana, you're not the only one that's in the Matrix, nor are you even one of the people that is suffering the most that's in the Matrix. And for you to like necessarily make I wouldn't say a deliberately boring movie, but perhaps like a deliberately inaccessible movie in the sense that it's so very, very personal, rather than just giving the project to someone else who'd be able to kind of like talk about the same revolutionary struggles
from
in a
a
more
different point of
universal
view.
manner, or a more universal manner that might have resulted in a better film. But yeah, I mean, like, so how does like the philosophy, how does that feed into your negative review of the movie?
So for me, like I told you, I think that the movie was born castrated. The movie was always even before it was done, it had lost its edge, because I think that the critique itself, it's already passé. It's already antiquated. It belongs to another decade. It's trapped in the
Boomer
past.
shit.
Yeah, it's boomer shit. Totally boomer shit. I think we're in a different paradigm now when it comes to our relationship to simulation and our relationship to the digital world. I think nobody still buys this idea that the digital space is an open space for freedom and creativity. Meta was born in memes of people, like fake avatars and NFTs, and everything is already captured within the logic of capital. There's no freedom in the digital space anymore. I think this is hauntology. It's a ghost of a past dream of revolutionary, emancipatory intentions of identity politics within the digital space, and it's all bullshit. We know it. There's no revolution in identity politics. None. Absolutely zero. This is woke liberal bullshit. There's no revolutionary aspirations to be achieved through identity politics. This is just the liberal mindset. It's center-left crap that is trapping and distracting people into thinking that the revolution is going to come from incorporating different identities within the system. This is not true. And I think nobody believes that anymore. That's why the movie is blunt. It's a sword that is completely blunt and unable to push the point, because nobody ever believed that in the past 20 years. And it's making a point that it was born dead. It's a stillborn idea. And this is my frustration. My main philosophical frustration with the movie is this. Like you said, even the fight scenes have no stake. I think Lana starts the movie knowing that her effort is worthless.
Okay, so I've heard some people say that it's a deliberately bad movie. Like, she crashed her own franchise as the ultimate form of protest. And
Let's go there.
See, I don't want to go there. Fuck that. Like, first of all, like, I think this is where like it gets to bad revolutionary politics, and this is where this is where somewhere where I will draw a line where look, like, I have some friends, maybe you've heard this, maybe people talk about this, like they talk about how like sports is ultimately bad for the revolution because like it allows people to like, experience too much joy, because otherwise that joy should be channeled toward the revolution, or rather the frustration that is otherwise expressed through joy in sports would be better formed, targeted towards the revolution. And fuck that. Like, dude, you gotta like, there has to be a balance between joy and
aspiration or struggle.
Well, joy and action. Like, for example, like if maybe her own criticism of the first Matrix movies is that like, oh, they actually produce too much joy and not enough action. So like, the first three movies, like all of that Foucault criticism like didn't actually come through, and so now it's front and center in these movies because like, the narrative just produced too much just ephemeral joy and there was no action. But then again, like if you're saying like, if we're really meant to believe that Lana crashed this fucking ship and made a deliberately bad movie so that with the sole intention of the message getting through so that, we would then, take to the streets or whatever, I just think that message is, if you really take away people's joy, their one sense of even believing that they're escaping the system, of course, then they're most in the system. But I still think that joy is not completely useless. Then the message is just not going to come through.
Yeah, she didn't crash it hard enough. If that was the intention, she didn't crash it hard enough.
I think that the crash just wasn't maybe beautiful enough. Like,
exactly.
Yeah,
if you're gonna burn bridges and destroy the ship, make it fucking epic. Like I mean, what do you think about the after credit scene about the cat memes, the cat tricks, or something like that?
Okay, so initially I thought that this was like a mouthpiece for Lana when she said like narrative is dead, what I have the line written down. She says, or rather someone who's like a Warner Brothers dude says, yeah, movies are dead, games are dead, narrative dead, media is nothing but neuro trigger response and viral conditioning. I mean, I think that that's the cynicism that she was getting kind of swallowed in that ultimately she overcame. But see, that ultimately she overcame, and then I'm kind of going on the same shtick I was before. But the thing is like,
there's
I
something
don't
there.
believe that. Well, yeah, I mean,
there's something
but
there.
I don't. Let me just last say is that
sorry.
like another thing is that I just don't believe that Lana, really chose to make this movie for idealistic reasons. I think that it was a paycheck that she needed, and that her motivations were entirely of the Matrix, not to undermine the Matrix.
Absolutely. And I will probably get my closing statement within this using Nietzsche's Zarathustra's metaphor, like this notion that I think the true hope is the annihilation of nihilism. This is the only true hope we can have. We have to overcome nihilism. And I still believe that this movie is very much nihilistic. I think that Lana herself is, like if we want to recap Zarathustra's journey in a very simple way, we have three stages of development in Zarathustra. We have the camel, which is us in the desert carrying all values. We struggle because all values are heavy. We replicate all values and we carry these all values, and these all values are our struggle burden, and they will tell us how fast we can move forward. The second stage in Zarathustra is the lion. So the lion rebels against all value and destroys everything, and is just shedding all over the place and tearing everything apart. This is very much nihilism. But eventually, after the lion comes the birth of the baby, the new child, okay? Which could be, there's also, I made an analysis about the Zarathustra journey in Matrix 1, 2, and 3. And we actually have a baby face at the very end from the Matrix, providing Neo with an opportunity to overcome nihilism and actually produce something new, right? Because the third stage in Zarathustra's journey is to be born again, a child that has left behind the burden of the camel, has overcome the destructive nihilism of the lion, and is able to produce new values. And this is what I think Lana is trapped. Lana is still very much a nihilist. She's not being able to produce new values. She's just criticizing all values. But in this sense, even when the slaves take power, they are still slaves because they're just reacting to the old kingdom. In order to overcome the master-slave dialectic, you have to overcome the fact that you cannot be only a reactionary, because reactionaries are still reacting to all values. True overcoming of nihilism is to produce new values, not only to criticize the existing and the past ones. We have to be able to produce new set of values that will set the direction of the revolution and creativity in new potential directions. And this is where I think Lana potentially fails the hardest. In the end, this movie is nothing more but a tantrum, a nihilistic tantrum against her incapability of producing nothing new. So it's just nihilistic complaining.
Yeah, if I may bring it back to it's like, God damn, I never, there are a lot of things that went through my mind when formulating what this movie might be like, but it was never the idea that Lana just like takes a mouthful of blue pills and just like chews them up and then goes, like a little fucking 5-year-old, to like show you like what their food looks like.
I'm rich, bitch.
But that's what it is. Yeah, I'm rich, bitch. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Speaking of which, before we end, I just wanted to. I read this book recently that I think maybe you've heard of, or maybe actually a Wisecrack fan recommended it to me. A guy named Nick Pinkston. Have you ever heard of a book called The Listening Society?
No. Who's the writer?
This guy. So it's actually a character, kind of like in the Kierkegaardian fashion, named Hansi Freinecht, and it's basically a metamodernism manifesto.
Oh, I love metamodernism.
And it's very fascinating. Basically, I mean, in terms of like what, if we think back of like what Neo and Trinity, like what the actual challenges in front of them in remaking society, this guy actually tries to answer it. And it's pretty fascinating. And the one thing I'll say is, like, again, when it comes to cinema or narrative, the actual hard work that it's going to take to improve society is not very fun to watch. And so somebody who figures out how to, dramatize that in an interesting way. And I don't think, who's that? Okay. Interesting. All right.
You
I'm going to
really
take a
need to
look at
read.
that.
You really need to
Is
read
that,
it.
is it a lot about developmental psychology?
No.
Because that's what the book I just read is. Okay.
Well, I haven't read the whole book yet, but I love this notion of metamodernity because it's a true overcoming of postmodernity in this nihilistic sense. It's actually it's strange when you think about, well, modernism was this notion that yes, we have access to objective reality. Reason will give us a sense of what the world really is about, right? So we were never modern. It was always bullshit. Humanism was always a lie. But the issue is that we build society around this idea that humanism and modernism were actually real. That's what led us to this fucked up position that we're in right now. Humanism was wrong. We were never modern, right? So postmodernism, it's simplifying. It's a criticism saying, no, all meta-narratives were actually bullshit. Religion was bullshit. Productivity was bullshit. Progress was bullshit. Science was a lot of bullshit as well. So there was a lot of bullshit in there. And a lot of people got trapped and they got stuck in postmodernism. What I think metamodernism is doing right is that they're saying, well, truth is not a point in time. Truth is not a place where you get at. Truth is a direction. So metamodernism is hopeful in the sense that truth is presented to us at different points in time with different abilities and technologies that help us come closer to material reality. And what we have to deal with is that at every point in time, the narrative we create to explain reality itself, it's only temporary. So we are not supposed to treat meta-narrative as an eternal leitmotif that is going to guide human effort forever. We are supposed to be much more transitory in our relationship to narratives, and narratives are supposed to be used when they're useful and discarded when they're antiquate. And this is the overcoming of nihilism. We are not only to discard meta-narratives, we're supposed to create new ones.
And this is why I think that there is no real development in this fourth film, because I think a lot of the things that are like more kind of progressive about moving past nihilism is present in the third movie.
Yep.
As vague as it may be, I mean, I don't really know what other option you can really have, but yeah, this movie really just does seem like a tantrum in the face of a pretty complete trilogy that, and this seems like a complete step backwards, a complete regression.
Yeah, it's a remake.
Yeah.
People could say it's a remake, a prequel, a sequel. It's everything. In this sense, it's very Baudrillardian because it's a simulation of a simulation. It's the pumpkin pie latte based on a pumpkin pie based on a pumpkin, where the pumpkin doesn't exist anymore. You're just drinking the flavor of the cake of the fruit. We're seeing the repetition of a simulation that never took place to begin with. We are
right, but the line I refuse to cross is that, oh, the movie's brilliant. No, fuck that. It's not good.
No.
It's not good.
No.
Yeah. All right. Last question I want to ask you, and I'm sure maybe people have asked you this before, and I don't know if you if you even want to say anything publicly about this, but do you ever think about running for office?
Yeah, I've been approached by so many parties, man. But why the question before I reply?
Just because you strike me as a very charismatic person who would be very good at it.
Thank you, man. I don't know if there's a compliment or a punchline there, because
I'll say that from an idealist perspective. I mean, okay, maybe you wouldn't make it in American politics, but
I will be dead. Yeah, I will die very quickly. As soon as people discover my Marxist background, I will be in real jeopardy. I thought about doing some stuff, but then I got really scared really quickly because I got death threats everywhere. But everywhere. As soon as I started getting too close to politics in Latin America, I started getting death threats, like almost immediately. So I decided to, I'm not going to risk my family and my life for something that is going to be cut short. So I'm going to work on the periphery of where I think I can provide some support. And I think that's one of the key values out of critical theory. Like what I'm trying to do, and this is what we did just now, is a perfect example of what I want to do more of, is that I want to politicize aesthetics. Because I think what happens a lot today is that politics are being aestheticized. American politics is the perfect example. You have both parties that provide support to private intentions. Like the light, your left and your right, they both want private property and private equity and the development of private goods and the private sector, but they provide it in different aesthetics. They painted red and they painted blue, but they have the same intentions. So what I'm trying to do is the other way around. What I'm trying to do is I'm politicizing aesthetics. Why are aesthetics presented for us in a way, and what are the political implications of the way we see the world?
Okay, see, that's why, and I just want to make two more movie things to connect what you just said. But like,
Yep.
So I know you just reviewed Don't Look Up. I just watched it last night. But like, I don't know, man. Similar, very much what you just said. I feel like that movie is kind of like the ultimate virtue signal, like in the sense that like it's just a bunch of Hollywood elites who are, like
part of the problem.
I don't know. Exactly, or part of the problem, saying that like, oh look, like I can make fun of the problem, therefore I'm helping it, but they're not. I don't really think I don't really think that their criticism is any less impotent than Lana's in a sense.
Oh yeah, I agree 100%. I think for me, the recap of that movie is Max Fisher's sentence: "It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism."
100%. I'm pretty sure that's like the origin of the movie. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then secondly, in terms of like a Nietzschean film, you did tell me like a couple months ago that you were going to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I never saw the review on your channel.
It's written, but I haven't done it yet because I have a long list of things that I want to do. Like I wanted to do these matrices with you. I was really waiting for this. I'm ready to do the review of American Psycho. And I want to continue on the work of Baudrillard, and I want to specifically do an analysis on this notion that a man raised by wolves is a wolf, not a man, but a man raised by objects is an object, not a person. And I think this character is present in the Don't Look Up. Jonah Hill, he's an object. He's not a person. and his goodbye speech saying, I just want to say goodbye to all the cool things we're gonna save, like cool apartments and cool cars. He's not a person. He's an object. Jonah Hill even said that, and I really like it. He said that he based his character not on a person but on a festival. So
that's great.
That's fucking lovely. I adore it. I think that the movie has a lot of like very smart bits and pieces, even though it's very impotent as well. Because like we said, the same as The Matrix, nothing run better on MTV than a riot against MTV. And
MTV.
This was done on the 90s. This was done on Fox. This was done on The Simpsons. This was done on Family Guy. This was done everywhere. This is people wearing Che Guevara's t-shirt. The revolution is already commoditized and sold to you in a nice package, so you can over-identify with a revolutionary master signifier and do nothing. Taking the blue pill, it's actually over-identifying with the idealistic signifier of the revolution idea.
The red pill.
Exactly. This is the true blue pill. The true blue pill is thinking that you're taking the red pill by thinking about it. And this is the difference for me between idealism and materialism. You cannot provide idealistic solution to material problems. You don't solve material problems with idealistic solutions. The revolution will never be idealistic. It can only be materialistic. And this is what movies and narratives can never provide.
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time. This was great. I'm glad we made good on the promise. So do you have plans to see Network? Because you and your brother and I just like geeked out about it so hard. So
I need to see it, bro. I need to see it. But I have such a long list. I just wrote down like 40 films that I want to do because my main goal for next year is to do exactly that, to politicize aesthetics. And I have done content on the criticism of capitalism and late capitalism for the past almost year and a half. So I'm taking some different directions because now that I was a Marxist, Lacanian, Hegelian, Zizekian for like 2 years, but then I completely fell in love with Deleuze, and Gilles Deleuze like changed my mindset about how do we produce new concepts, and these new concepts are the tools for the revolution. And now I'm reading Deleuze all over. I'm reading new philosophy, old philosophy with Deleuze point of view. So this is giving me so many new tools to explore the world and give meaning to what I'm seeing. And I want to explore this notion of creativity a little bit before I go back to the critique of capitalism. And I think Network is very much a critique of capitalism. So I don't want to go back too quickly to my roots.
Yeah. Well, that's just one of the great things about philosophy and about reading, because I find myself doing the same thing. Is like whatever I happen to be reading at the time, if it's really resonating with me, then all aesthetics I just like see through that prism.
Oh yeah,
and So
this ability to be kaleidoscopic about the world, and I think this also reflects back on the true human spirit, on the true openness of the human spirit, our ability to give infinite amount of meanings to the same events. And philosophy are these argumentative apparatuses that we can take back and rethink about past events from different points of view. Like this is what I wanted to do. This is what I did with Matrix 1, 2, and 3. I did Hegel, Marx, Lacan, Nietzsche, Baudrillard, Foucault, and I took like 11 different philosophers and I tried to apply their argumentative apparatuses to what the Matrix was trying to do, to see if the Matrix was actually successful or unsuccessful with their intentions. And this is what I think is the richness of the human spirit, our ability to go back and take a look at things and rethink them from a different perspective. Because I think it was I forgot the name, who was the philosopher, the Greek philosopher, who said it: a man can never drink water from the same river twice, because you're never Euclides, exactly, because we're never the same man and it's never the same river.
Yeah, right. Either Heraclitus or Herodotus. One of those two.
One of those two, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, brother, thank you so much, man. This was a great time. And Happy New Year, man.
Yeah, you too, man. It was a pleasure talking to you. It's always great to have this conversation with somebody that absolutely. I can go fucking all out and geek out on these ideas. It's just so nice.
Totally. Guys, please subscribe to Diego's channel. He doesn't need the subs. He's doing great. But I mean, I promise it'll be worth it.
No, the other way around, man. Like I have to confess, every time I have a conversation with Jared, I have a little bit of a geek out, because he was one of my main inspirations to start doing my channel and start doing some work. So Jared, cool. it's a pleasure, man. I hope we can have more of these conversations.
Yeah, dude, totally. Any movie, I'm down, or any video game. Hey, we're gonna start playing Elden Ring, people, when that comes out. I got a PS5, so I'm ready.
We're gonna do that. My man. All right, man. Take care. Happy New Year, bro.
All right, take care, man.
You too.
All you guys, thanks for watching. Peace.